All right. Well, I certainly hope you have enjoyed the series on advanced theory so far. We are ready to go to basically another level of dealing with musical theory. One thing you should have noticed very well by now that I really tried to keep you out of some type of notation software or notating and getting into that too deep because I've learned that this may not be um, theoretically correct to some individuals, but music theory is very simplistic to me. I try to keep music theory very simple. That way, that any things that I'm dealing with, I try to break it down to the most simple concepts I can, and I only let it get complicated when it needs to get complicated. I mean, if there's a reason for things to get complicated and me to start getting into some serious notation and theoretical notations and applications that's actually written to explain what's going on for actually what I'm trying to do to try to work it out, then I will. If not, I try to keep things as simple as possible, and I only let things get complex when I need them to be. Because when I was studying music, I played guitar for a long time, never had any concept about music or music theory, even basics. And, I just played, whatever happened to be coming out of my head, and I don't know how I got started that way, but I just did, and so, when I started trying to study music and understand music, I went through a whole lot of phases of trying to understand music theory and music composition. And it was very frustrating trying to figure out what the best path was because it wasn't like I was at some music school at Juilliard studying music theory. It wasn't like that. It wasn't that I was studying piano at Juilliard, some famous music school. It just wasn't. I was at my house. I had to do it on my own. I had a guitar teacher that's a music instructor that helped me out quite a bit. And as far as he could take me with understanding things, he did. And, but I had to do a whole lot of it on my own, digging and digging and digging and practicing and trying it this way and trying it the other way before I finally, one day I woke up and I was like, I understand it. So I try to tell you that story because a lot of people will get as much music theory as they need, and then they're good to go. And a whole lot of the theory they understand, that if they have to, they'll go write it, and they can understand some basic notation and things like that. And some don't, and it's really hard because the ones that don't, if you throw too much theory at them, from the point of view of something like this and it throws them off. Whereas if you can give it the visualization and the theoretical concepts like I've tried to do so far, that it's very simple and it's not real complicated and it doesn't look like math. It doesn't look like some mathematical algebraic formula for them to work out and try to remember. And that may sound like lazy music theory, but I've found a lot of times if I'm getting together with somebody or I'm composing, that a lot of times, unless I'm dealing with somebody in a symphonic situation, or it's for something like doing something like movie scores and things like that, a lot of times the atmosphere just is not, let's pull out our notation software and see if we can write something. Unless I'm dealing with people that are very symphonic or in nature, or if it's a lot of like a movie score kind of thing, or sometimes maybe even heavy jazz or something like that. But a lot of times it's just not. That's not the first tool we go to, is the notation software to try to build a song. We start messing around in our head and thinking about the theory we understand and trying to get simple concepts together to try to move forward. And as we're going along, hopefully we're making notes of that, and or at the end of it being able to write out what we've done. But sometimes it just does, in different situations, the starting tools that you use to compose may be different. So that's something very realistic to keep in mind. The next thing is that the simple concepts that you understand we are going to come to the next level. And the way that we do that is we're going to come into the notation software to look at some of the more advanced theoretical concepts, to picture them, to spend a little bit more time in a more academic atmosphere at looking at the concepts that we've discussed and some others. But at this point, that's with what you understand by now, you're ready to take that step with a lot of layman terms of what we've talked about before we start getting into a more academic situation of looking at it like this. Looking at it, like, it's more mathematical. Music can be very mathematical. It just can be. And, the thing is, another issue that we'll come to as far as that is concerned is notating what you're feeling. That can be a huge issue. So keep that in mind, because you don't know how many times there was when I was first starting to learn music theory and writing something, and I'd be like playing something along on my guitar or on the piano or something, and I'd be like, how am I going to write that? And I'd spend all kinds of time trying to figure out what exactly is that. You can just notate anything with notation and notes and timing, for the most part, different articulations and notes to describe articulations and dynamics and things like that. But sometimes it can take a little bit of time if you're not real familiar with it. So we're going to go to the next step and start looking at it from a more academic point of view, from inside of a piece of software, and approach the things we're looking at from the inside of notation software, and looking at it from the notation point of view, and the things that work together and the things that may not work together, the things that may be real obvious and the things that may not be real obvious, and some of the hurdles and obstacles you may run into as you're progressing along in this arena and this area of musical theory. Now, as far as software or something like that, there are lots of pieces of software that are free. You can download MuseScore. It's a fairly functional piece of software for composing music. This is Sibelius here. There are lots of them. You can download all kinds of pieces of software to compose. And if once you understand the basics and what you're looking for, that some of the more advanced things in the piece of software, you just got to kind of be looking for. Something like Sibelius here, if you have no concept about music theory or how things go together or what you can use, you may get lost just looking around at the stuff that is here and have no idea about what might not be in some piece of software, or might be in another piece of software that you might use for your type of composing, or the stuff that you resolve and revolve around. Some musicians will revolve around certain types of genres. Some musicians won't. Some musicians want to get their hands dirty in every kind of paint and color and every kind of genre there is, and they're just into it, and they just love music. They don't care. What is it? That's cool, bro. What is going on there? Some people aren't. Some people get into, reggae. There's an example. No, dude, I'm a reggae person, bro. I got my dreadheads, I got my dreadlocks, and I'm just reggae, bro. I just am. That's the kind of music I play. That's stuff I'm into. That other stuff is cool, but that's what I do. So you're really going to be focusing on what you need as far as theory to do that type of genre, and that can be another huge hurdle for you to comprehend and to understand, so that you can apply to yourself and what you're doing the theoretical needs that you have to do what you want to do as well as possible. Does that make sense? And it's very simple. That concept may sound complicated and it may sound simple, but you'd be surprised how many people they'll be like, well, I got to study all this stuff, where no, I don't know that I think it would benefit you to spend that much time studying all that theory, because you're not going to really be using it in what you're doing. I mean, if you have extra time and you're not busy writing and composing and, growing in your genre that you're focusing on, then that's cool. But the basics should be what you're looking at. And you can get a lot of that by just digging around in your genre. If, let's say, you're a reggae person, listening to a lot of reggae, deconstructing a lot of reggae, what is happening there? What are they doing? How can I change that a little bit to give it a little bit different flavor? What might I be able to do with some basic, comprehensions of theory and maybe a little bit of immersion in some other types of genres of music? You might come up with something cool that can give you your reggae a little bit different flavor that make you stand out a little bit, by doing something a little bit differently, but not going too far out of the genre to where all of a sudden you sound like a country star. You know what I'm saying? That's a huge thing to understand. All of a sudden you've left reggae, and I don't know what the hell that is you're playing, bro, but it ain't happening in Jamaica, dude. So, that's another thing that you have to keep in mind. So, with that in mind, the next step forward, I try to do it this way, that way, by now that you have a pretty good understanding of most of the basic concepts that are happening in music theory. And if you're a theoretician, if you've been watching my channel, you're like, oh, bro, it's like, that's why I do that, because at some point you may be watching those videos that, that the first videos I put together for basic music theory and for people to be able to relate that stuff to things happening in the DAW, because I learned that when you're composing, let's take a music score, for example. This may not be totally symphonic. This may not be your reggae genre. But when you're working on a movie score type of atmosphere, or some pop song that's, like a movie score that they've cut way down so that they can sell it, some of those things get very complicated. And as you work through them, it's not just the music theory that you have to worry about. There's also the DAW itself, the tools in the DAW, the sound sculpting things that can happen in there for actually changing the actual sounds. And then that can be a huge compositional tool. I mean, it's almost like another form of music theory. All the things you can do inside the DAW to change something's sound. You might put something together and you get inside the DAW, and if you're really good, fairly decent audio engineer that knows how to use all those tools, it might start changing how you're putting things together because of tools and abilities that you have to work with music once you start recording it and mixing it and mastering it, that it might change a lot of things happening, and it's a really serious concept to get in your head, because that is a whole nother level of production, that you're taking the DAW, all the tools in the DAW, the things that can be done with the audio as a part of the compositional tools that you work with, not just your theory and your composition software and your instruments, but the DAW itself and all the tools that are there. They are part of our composing tools to sculpt the composition into something really cool and beautiful that you're working on. So that we are not going to get into right now. You can look at my audio engineering channel for that, Brent Cartwright. And you can I've got tons of videos, and I put videos on there all the time, so that the engineering concepts that are happening there, that you can apply them to what's going on at no matter what level or what area you happen to be working on. But it was basically put together so that no matter what area you're working on, that you should be able to go in there and look for what you need for what type of work you're doing as an audio engineer. So with that being said, where do we go from there? Where do we start? Do we want to start from basics? We've already talked about basics. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to actually start reviewing basics and theory in a piece of software so that you can see it, because you go to talk to a teacher that's like, let's say you're going to want to study to be a virtuoso pianist. Now, you go to somebody who's going to teach you to do that, who might teach you all by yourself, or you might be in some big university. You'd be probably pretty sure that their procedure probably might not happen like all the videos you've been watching me show you. You would have started out directly with notation just from the basics, so that it would get in your head so that you relate all those concepts directly and rapidly to the written form and the written theoretical forms and capabilities that you have in writing and notation, to view and to share and to record your theoretical experiments, learning, and compositions. And it's at that's a very simple concept that may sound a little bit complex, but it can be very simple. That I've seen a lot of people that if you start on music theory and you don't just try to layman feed them the theory first, that all of a sudden that stuff all goes in the garbage, their instrument goes in the garbage, and they're done, bro. They're just done. But some of them I'd be like, well, I try to teach them that way. That way those basic concepts kind of sunk into their head, and they'll get what they need out of what they want to do, and they'll learn real rapidly whether they want to play an instrument, and without getting, this scaring them away. I'm saying you want to learn about audio engineering, so immediately we're going to deconstruct the fast Fourier transform and all the mathematics and algebra and trigonomic equations that go with it. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't think I really want to be an audio engineer. And it's like, well, let's go back a little bit and give you a little bit and feed you in layman terms so that maybe that for those that really want to grow, that like I've said, that there's some point where they're going to jump off the theory wagon and just start playing, and they've got enough, and they'll come back if they really need some more, and there's some that are like, no, it sparks in them, and they're like, yeah, dude, now I'm starting to understand it. Now all this stuff that you're trying to show me on the paper and all these concepts that, in a written form on notation, they make sense to me now. I can understand the basic layman concepts, and now I'm starting to try to visualize them on the paper, and it's much easier for me to do that, and I feel much more comfortable with it, with a really basic understanding of the complexities that are trying to be written in a more complex form with notation. And the theoretical concepts don't look so mind-boggling as you're looking at the notation and going, what the hell is all that? Excuse my language. Does that make sense? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start out with some real basics, and we're just going to try to progress through that. It shouldn't take that long to address the basics and work into the more advanced theories that we've been talking about, because as we go along, a lot of the more advanced theoretical concepts that we'll be dealing with, that they will be, how do I put this? A lot of advanced theoretical concepts are just like philosophers sitting around a coffee shop. You can talk about them all day long. If you understand the basic concepts and the basic structures you're dealing with, then you can sit around and you don't need a piece of paper to sit around trying to understand them and voice them. You need a guitar and a cup of coffee with somebody who has some understanding of musical theory, and you can sit around and experiment and talk about possible things that could be happening in theory, things, different directions and different applications, different progressions, and all kinds of things. But if you don't understand those basics, you're not going anywhere there. You can sit around and all talk like they're all speaking Greek or something, and you ain't getting nowhere. So that can be a huge tool that people will do that without actual notation. And sometimes they'll have pieces of paper and notation to try to explain it to somebody better what's going on, so they can actually see what's going on. They've got some idea or something, and they're like, what does that look like on paper, for to help them work through it. It's just like talking to yourself. Sometimes you get something, think of something, so you sit around and, well, then and you try to talk things out loud out with yourself. That's a huge tool to help you work things out. Your brain can hear your voice going. It keeps your train of thought going a lot better than just your mind rolling. Does that make sometimes? But it does help you to keep focused on what you're trying to work out by actually talking it through out loud. So that is a huge concept to get through your head. And, so we're going to go back to there, and we should be able to move through those things with the basic understandings you have now fairly rapidly, so that most of those concepts, that you can really easily see them in notation form. And the things that we were talking about that are more advanced theory, that you should very rapidly be able to look at the piece of paper and go, oh yeah, that's dealing with that basic concept in some way. And if you see something that's throwing you off a little bit, then at least you understand the foundation of it, correct? So that when you're looking at something on a piece of paper and something happened theoretically, or some kind of change or anything else happening, that you understand the basic concept of what's trying to be related there. And something you may not understand is much easier to work out, figure out what's happening there with some of the more basic fundamental complexities broken down, to something that's simpler to understand, so that you're seeing something simple and there's something a little more complex stacked on top of that simplicity that you have to work out. What is that happening there? And for lack of a better way to put it, that's basically what I'm trying to do. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to start out with notation software, and we're going to start working our way through the basics that we've already talked about, and we're going to look at them in written form. And we're also going to have tablature for different instruments to look at, and we'll discuss some things that we didn't discuss at all. Transposing of instruments, the basic theory we're talking about, I didn't address that because, if you're a clarinet player that's in B flat, I didn't know that you might be. So and everybody else would have no idea what the heck I'm talking about. So does that make sense, or why I would want to do that? So those are that's a reference, and to give you an idea that, some of the things we might be running across when we're looking at theory from a more academic perspective of the actual written theoretical concepts and compositions. So I hope you've enjoyed the series so far, and I hope you understand what's coming next, and I hope you stick around if you want to get into some more advanced theory, because I'm going to put this as simple as possible, like I've tried to do so far with the concepts being written, so that as your complexities grow and your theoretical understanding, knowledge, and experimentation grows, that you're able to look at these pieces of notation, these notated compositions or ideas or experiments, with a better understanding of what's happening there. And you'll be able to sit and talk the theory. You'll be able to write the theory. You'll be able to work things out in a few different ways. And at some point, you will come to an understanding of, okay, I'm done. I really don't want to understand anymore. Or no, I need to understand more of this. Or I might understand more of this. Not at this moment. When I have time, it's not real applicable to what I'm trying to accomplish at this moment, but I'm going to step forward with it more and more and more as I have time. Those are decisions you kind of have to make as you go along. So the first part of it might be kind of a review, but looking at it at notation, so get ready for that. But it's good for you, because you are going to be reviewing those basics again, which helps you. Try to remember in school that when you're learning stuff, they're going to pound you on it over and over and over and over again with tests until it sinks into your head. That's the whole point of that. So we're not going over on board on that, because we're going to sink it. You're going to get a review right now, but from a different perspective, so that you can see it written. It's just not me pointing at some keys and talking to you and a verbal video kind of learning thing. You're going to actually be looking at things written and symbols and notation configurations. That's a whole nother way of learning, and another thing for another medium to help you better understand the music theory, what's happening into it, and to be able to remember it and use it. So I hope that made sense, and I hope you stick around for the rest of it when we start looking at advanced theory, and we start out our advanced theory courses from this point on from the notation software and from a notation point of view, to look at it from a more academic standpoint, and so that we can see it from a different medium. Peace, hope, love. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one when we get started on the basic theoretical concepts from a more academic standpoint.